everyone to OnPodcast, the Microsoft podcast, where we talk about Microsoft stuff on a podcast. I'm your host today, Kareem Anderson, and I'm joined by.
The fun one, David Allen. Hope everybody's doing well. We got a lot to talk about tonight. No puns intended.
Yeah, I mean, we should just let our chat assistant do the talking for us this today's podcast because that's basically all we're talking about. Our open discussion today is about Microsoft's new Edge browser and Bing search, including a new what Microsoft calls AI Copilot and chat via our new friend ChatGPT. Microsoft is promising the following updates to users who search and use web browsing experiences through their new reinvented Edge and Bing tools. So some of the things that they highlighted during their random secret presentation that happened earlier this week was better search. The new Bing gives people an improved version of the familiar search experience, providing more relevant results from simple things like sports scores, stocks prices, and weather, along with new sidebar that shows more comprehensive answers if you want them. The other thing we're going to be getting is complete answers. Bing reviews results from across the web to find and summarize the answers you're looking for. For example, you can get detailed instructions for how to substitute eggs for another ingredient in a cake you're baking right in that moment without having to scroll anywhere or through multiple results. So, for those people who have egg allergies or just looking for gluten free options, there's a new chat experience. Now, this is the thing that's been getting perhaps the most coverage, even though it was probably the smallest section of some of this new AI features. It's becoming a far more complex searches, such as for planning a detailed trip itinerary or researching what TV to buy. The new Bing offers new interactive chat. The chat experience empowers people to refine their searches until they get the complete answer they're looking for through more details, more clarity, more ideas. There are, I think, sources in there that you can kind of go on multiple different trips if you want to go down different paths to find even more information. This thing is supposed to be helping launch a creative spark for people. There are times when you might need more answers or just might need more inspiration. The new Bean can generate the content that can help you. If you played around with ChatGPT, then you know what we're talking about. If not, we're going to get into it in a little bit. The new Microsoft Edge experience, which has been updated in the new browser. You can kind of play around with some of that stuff in, I believe, Canary and Edge dev channels. Has a new all new AI capabilities and a new look, which is tons of rounded corners if you're not into that kind of thing. Avert your eyes. There's a chat compose section as well, which will be in the Edge sidebar, I believe, and it'll give you kind of a lengthy detail or summary of all kinds of things that happen to be on the page that you're looking at. So if you're looking at a website, it'll give you the financials of that site, the date of publications, authors, all these other extra information just kind of built into the sidebar. You can either place the sidebar to permanently be there as you're kind of scrolling through the web, or you can hover over the Bing new icon and it'll give you kind of a scroll down and then it'll disappear when you move on to the next page. Of course, Microsoft credits its relatively new partner OpenAI with being able to deliver its new Edge and Bing experiences. They mentioned that several times throughout the presentation. They're using OpenAI's chat GPT language models, but they are adding what they call Prometheus model, which is something that is their own, I guess, filtered layer on top of all of these OpenAI chat models to adhere to things like sourcing, uh, safety measures. They implemented things like, I guess, a no cheating filter. Basically, if the students want to go in and say, "Here, write me a term paper," it'll say, "Hey, how about here's some information that you can write your own paper with." Um, they've also, I think Microsoft is saying that when developing its AI core for search algorithms, it says it's the biggest leap that it's had in 2 decades as far as the relevancy in its searches, which is kind of an indictment of Bing, but at least
Mm.
promising for those of us who use Bing or have had to listen to Bing being the butt of tons of jokes. Microsoft's Prometheus model, I believe, also allows them to implement it in more ways than just chat. I think Microsoft mentioned that they will be having a event, or at least tentatively scheduled an event for next month, where they will show some of this chat functioning and other more in-depth versions of the language model being shown off in the productivity. So prepare to see the templates that I think people use in Excel, their PowerPoint, things like that. They're about to get way more detailed and diverse in the information that is being displayed. So I rambled on for quite a bit. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, as you were mentioning there, I think that a lot of this information has, it's come very quickly. It's come very heavy, and I think, for us tech journalists, we're sifting through it, at an interesting pace, and there's various things coming across our desk. Almost, every couple of hours, we're seeing somebody else's opinions. We haven't really seen a big consumer opinion about it yet. Consumers aren't ranting and raving over either way, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. And something you mentioned there is something I want to bring up with Microsoft having their own Prometheus layer. You mentioned that if students want to use it to write their term paper or help do their homework, that the Chat GPT will divert to giving them information or prompts for what they need. Somebody is going to pick that up and twist that into something too. I'm afraid that we're this could be the negative side of it. Are people going to say, well, there's the whole censorship thing, there's information accuracy we've got to think about. Um, I'm glad to see that Microsoft is wrapping the Chat GPT into their products and they're starting to create the ecosystem. I think that's the first step. Create the ecosystem, and then I think we're going to see Chat GPT hit a place of, clean it up, get it standardized, what it will provide, what it won't provide, set the consumer expectation, and then say, okay, consumers, this is now a part of our Microsoft 365 offering. Here you go. And then tweak it accordingly. We talked about it on last week's podcast. You know, this is probably the biggest smiles in the Bing department over on the Microsoft campus that they've had in years. That they have finally got something that Google is struggling with, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And I understand that they're rushing it to market. You can already sign up for, you know, be on the waiting list for the new Bing. So let's see what Microsoft does with it now that it's out there. How do they polish it? How do they implement it? I think that is key. We know the cash cow at Microsoft is Microsoft 365 and Azure. Get it implemented right, then you've got something. I think we're just scratching the surface of what they intend to do with it. Whether consumers will be receptive to it, we got to see.
Yeah, and hopefully, journalists like ourselves and everyone will do our due diligence in educating everyone about this. So again, we don't have missed expectations. We need to make sure that we are clarifying that there is uh, a chat that will be built into Bing. And this chat part is where people can go to do long form, long tail searches. Like you said, it's multiple, string along multiple searches into one thing and get a cohesive and coherent response from this updated version of ChatGPT. Then there's the Bing search part that is, I believe, using a supercomputer that Microsoft and OpenAI developed about 4 years ago, I believe. Um, and that is where it's going to be pulling in more relevant and contextual information for searches. So you won't go into Bing and just go into the search bar and start typing in like, "Hey, give me a Valentine's gift idea for my wife of 14 years, and her favorite color is purple, and her favorite flower is an orchid or something like that," and then get a list of, a sonnet plus, the perfect places to go buy fresh orchids. You're not going to necessarily get that in the URL search. That is for the chat portion. The URL search itself, though, will give you tons of information and sourced information in a more cohesive area. So this is where, like you said, the Bing team got a big smile on their face, not only because they're getting buzz about the chat portion of it, but because the search itself is getting more relevant information. Like they said, in the last 20 years, this is the first time in the last 20 years that their search results have probably been on par with Google. So that is big in and of itself to say, hey, we've made a leap that because we haven't had the market share in order to catch up to you, we've done it through a supercomputer essentially. We didn't have the world searching us like everyone searches Google, but we used a supercomputer plus an AI model to catch us up to where you're at. And on top of us catching up, this is the added thing we're going to be doing. We're also needing, like you and I mentioned, um, the monetization of this, the security parts of this. There's a lot of questions that are still open for this. And, as I think you and I were talking about off mic, people might be getting burnt out about hearing about it. One, because, they're not using it daily, they're just hearing the term over and over, like NFT. And, it's like, well, it's not relevant in my life. So I'm tired of hearing people talk about it, something that isn't here. So uh, with everyone getting burnt out on that part, I think it's incumbent upon Microsoft to, I don't know, maybe rush Windows 12 and say, hey, this is Windows. That little search icon down at the bottom of your screen can now do all these amazing things. Or maybe we put the search icon in the middle of your desktop, and it does this amazing new types of searches for local files. If you were planning a report, say you have, your boss just gave you a ton of uh, numbers and Excels, and they're like, hey, we need a report by end of day today to give to a client. And you can go to ChatGPT or whatever the version of this thing is called and say, hey, spit me out a report based on all of these Excel docs, and I need it in a presentation for PowerPoint that is conversational, and I want it to be whimsical at that because our client is Party City or whatever, and it'll spit you out a report, slides, data, a summation of everything that's in there, and it will be something that you can use. So it's, again, like I said, it's going to be incumbent upon Microsoft in order to sell it that way going forward.
The implementation team and the marketing team are really going to have to work side by side for this to work, I think. And the marketing team is really going to have to spin it. I hate to bring it up, but almost the way Apple is able to spin Siri, Amazon is able to spin Alexa. You've got to make it appealing to the consumer. It's got to be easy. Maybe it needs a buzz. Let's not bring Cortana back, please, but it's got to have something catchy, something that's going to stick in the consumer's mind, and something they're going to want to use. Or, like we talked about off camera here, we are creatures of habit. We have been going to Bing, we've been going to Google, and we've been typing in the search, and we have been asking our phones questions via voice for several years now. There's going to have to be something to convince the consumer to pick this up and say, hey, this is different. I'm willing to make a change. And the implementation team at Microsoft and the marketing team have really got to put their heads together, I think, to make it work. If they make it work, we've got something that changes the way we deal with information. If they don't, it'll be a passing fad. And we know, Microsoft is known for having passing fads over the last 10 years. I hope this isn't one of them.
I agree. And with that being said, we're going to move on to our headlines because our headlines deal with some more of this information. I will get into some of our boring headlines ahead of your more fun ones, something that'll get us off this course. The first headline, though, is drum roll. Google's response to ChatGPT or Microsoft's ChatGPT. So there you go. I got you to the left. We're right back where we started. Following Microsoft's announcement with the injection of OpenAI into Bing Search in the Edge browser, Google showed or had their presentation where they showed off, I believe, their new language model, which is, I think they call it Lambda or LAMDA for short, which is Language Model for Dialogue Applications. Now, it should also, like I said, I think we noted last week that Google was actually co-creator of the technology for ChatGPT. So They've moved on to Lambda, while Microsoft has gone on with ChatGPT plus Prometheus. So those are the competing things you need to know about. Their new model is called Bard. I forgot what Bard stood for, but just know that it's Bard. And I believe Google started off their presentation by saying they're initially releasing their lightweight version of the Bard, which uses Lambda, which is much smaller. Which is a much smaller model, requires significantly less computing power. This is also something that needs to be said, that all of these ChatGPT services require excessive computing power and resources, which is why we think that Microsoft is going to have to start charging for this pretty soon, because it's a couple cents for every search essentially. That equates to millions and billions of dollars being spent in order to run these things at scale. So Google's already starting off saying that their version is lightweight and less computer intensive. Um, BERT, which is, I believe, one of their first transformer models, this is all based on transformer models, was revolutionary in understanding the intricacies of human language. 2 years later, or 2 years ago, they introduced MUM, which is 1,000 times more powerful than BERT, and was at the next level of multi-language understanding. They moved on from MUM to Lambda, then Palm, and Image, and Music LEM, which are all going to be kind of coalesced into this new Bard. Basically, what it'll do is enhance their search. I don't know. I think they have a chat version of this, but it'll essentially be a sidebar similar to the way uh, Microsoft is introducing it in Bing and Edge. Now, some of the things that other things that they announced, which is weird because for all of this, ChatGPT slash Bard fight, most of the announcement that they had was basically to introduce features or expose features to the rest of the world that they already had in a bunch of other search stuff. There's, I believe, search with live view is open up to Barcelona, Dublin, and Madrid. The image search gains multi-search globally. Google Maps immersive view is now open up to London, Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, with plans for Amsterdam, Dublin, Florence, Venice, and more. The indoor view adds 1,000 new transit areas to its library, which includes more airports, malls, and train stations. Maps now has an EV supercharged station, a feature which will point out which where charging stations are along directions, as well as the charging speeds at these places. And the translation app will get the visual upgrades that I believe are already on Android. Now they will be on iOS. So that was Google's presentation for AI being infused in all their stuff with their own Bard competitor, or their own ChatGPT competitor with Bard, essentially. So that is that for Google. What do you got for us?
Well, let's see. Google has all the information, and we know that. I think Google has a chance here to, yeah, they're on their heels right now, but I think they, could very easily take the lead in what's going on here with the Chat GPT and all the AI that's floating around, regardless of whose version of what that you use. Remember, we've all been using Google all these years for a reason. They have the most info, they have what appears to be the most accurate info. So while they may be on their heels with the implementation of their AI and their chatbot based on what Microsoft is doing with the new Bing, I think they can still catch up. I saw something earlier today where their employees were not very thrilled with the presentation. I know there was some glitches in the presentation. I'm not going to, get into those or trash Google in any way, but
Oh, but I will. Google
okay.
had Google's. Well, that was saying the funny part was is that the thing that they wanted to show off, the core of the presentation that they were having, had a malfunction and it produced false information in the demo. That is where things
That it did.
that is where you perfect these things, and you, I don't say necessarily lie to the public, but you at least craft a perception of something in those demos. Whether or not it matches that, everyone's reality matches that perception once they get the product, entirely different. But that is at least where you do that. And I think you, myself, maybe Kip, our managing editor, had a discussion about, would Google have been better off not fumbling the core of its presentation, the counter to Microsoft's ChatGPT plus Bing, and just save this information for Google I/O because, again, while it was, I think it was a 40-minute long presentation in France, most of that presentation was to explain all the features that are coming to search, to their Google Lens, to Maps. These are things, these are known quantities, and it wasn't the AI necessarily that people were expecting. This was all just features that were already there that were being expanded globally. This is more of an international presentation, and you threw in this, probably last minute version of Bard. You made a press release, a print release of this the day before or 2 days before, and then you come up with this presentation that doesn't work. You might have been better off just waiting to Google I/O and having this amazing presentation, super polished, several examples, kind of like what they did with the call waiting thing that they did, about 4 or 5 years ago, where
Hmm.
your phone answered and waited on hold for you, and then took reservations, stuff like that. That was super cool. So, as to your point of the employees making fun of them, I'm like, this makes them seem like they're more on their heels than had they just not responded,
Yep.
say, hey, you know what, we're still the leading search. No one's leaving us anytime soon. And in June, guess what, Microsoft? We have the exact same thing.
And I think that's what Google should have done. It worries me, and this is something we mentioned on last week's podcast. For people that don't know, Google is two separate companies, and the search engine is its own entity. And the search engine makes its money off of advertisements. Big surprise. When you search something with Google, you see, five, six, seven ads sometimes at the top before you get to your search results. And I think what has put Google on its heels and forced them to give a less than stellar and quick response was, hey, if Microsoft changes the way people search, our ad revenue is going to go down. And this unit of our company needs 80% or better of ad revenue to survive. So Google felt like they had to jump out there and jump in the fight. I agree with what you're saying, Kareem. I felt like if they had said, look, we are the king of search, let Microsoft do what they will, let them respond to that, do what they will. As I just mentioned, Google has all the tools. They have the tools, they have the information, they have the ability, whether we like it or not. They could have simply said, look, we're going to have something in June. That's all they got to say. That's it. And like you said, come up with something polished, something that makes you go, wow, not something that even makes your employees go, what was that? You know, and I felt like that's what the employees did. That's what I did as a journalist. When I saw the presentation this week, I went, what was that? And there was even an excuse put out. I'm gonna call it an excuse. Maybe it was true that an employee lost a phone. That's the reason the demos didn't go as planned. Well, if that's the case, if your demo was based on one employee's phone, there's something wrong with that picture.
Yeah, skip it. I agree. What is our next headline? We'll give people a break.
Next, let's have a little fun. After all, I am the fun one of the group, so we have this make you laugh. Blizzard unveils the Diablo cookbook. Yes, folks, a Diablo cookbook with over 60 recipes. Video game merchandise, as we know, comes in all shapes and sizes, and I got to say, this is the first time I've ever heard of a video game based cookbook. The official cookbook will be available from Insight Editions on October 24th of 2023 for $34.99. The cookbook is 192 pages and will feature 60 recipes for both food and drink. The recipes will be based on the Diablo universe, characters, locations, and thereof, according to the description from the Simon and Schuster website. So, looks like you can also get it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Bookstops, and IndieBound wherever or whenever orders become open. So, a Diablo cookbook, 60 recipes. What do you think those could be? And how many of you are going to pick that cookbook up and actually cook those recipes? I got to
Um,
know.
yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do it, but that's only because Diablo wasn't my favorite game. I
Right?
encourage every studio to have a cookbook or to have online recipes for their games. I would love to see what the makers of Cuphead, would come up for as far as drinks or coffee recipes or anything like that. Or, I don't think there's really anything you can do in Halo that be food related. But there are games that I think this caters towards. Like, imagine a breadless or a yeast free cookbook or a non gluten cookbook for Last of Us, because we know what happens when you add bread into that universe. So I encourage, again, I think we should have fun with games and beyond just sitting in front of a screen. I think the merchandising should really explore these kind of wacky kind of things, because there are people who do this. There are people who um, have scented candles just for D&D sessions based off of leather and sword and sand and blood and stuff like. I mean, people will buy anything, and I say go for it, studios.
Well, even your non gamers are going to pick this up. Your people that are interested in food and drink are going to pick it up just out of curiosity. So that's a completely new market that, your culinary person picks it up for the food and drink purpose. Hey, they might go buy the game. That's a way to look at it.
I agree. I have a less fun headline. Yeah, well, you guys can skip ahead if you like. But we are a Microsoft podcast, so let's talk about some Microsoft stuff. Microsoft 365 and Teams and Viva got a ton of features last month. We're going to kind of go over it in case you didn't have a chance to uh, notice all the features and discuss what's going to be happening on the roadmap. We have Microsoft Teams, which got a simplified app update experience. With the new simplified app update, Teams will now maintain an index of all the apps and users that have been approved. This feature is tagged 95676 in the Microsoft 365 roadmap. I believe it was in preview, but it should be rolling out later this month, so the end of February, beginning of March, for general availability. Office app got idle sessions timeout with Microsoft 365 web apps. And this is a worldwide cloud version. Microsoft is releasing an sessions timeout tagged 55183 in the Microsoft 365 roadmap to allow users to configure a tenant-wide timeout policy to automatically sign out users after a period of inactivity on Microsoft 365 web apps. This is a security feature. This will help restrict unauthorized parties from accessing sensitive data concerning the organization, especially when using an unmanaged or shared device. The company has indicated this is an improvement over and will eventually replace the current app specified idle timeout settings in Outlook web app and SharePoint Online as well. I don't know when that feature is coming out, but we'll keep an eye on it probably in the next month or so. The idle session timeout prompt is another feature that should be rolling out in the first half of 2023. Microsoft will announce when it's going to hit general availability, so we'll keep an eye out for that as well. The Room Remote feature for desktop, Microsoft announced that it will be incorporating a new feature dubbed Room Remote to Teams. The feature is tagged 95482, which will allow users to control a nearby shared meeting room device from their desktop PC with the Teams client. The company made it its first debut on mobile, and it will begin rolling it out the middle of this month with the release general availability of mid-March. So, if you have been trying it on your mobile device, it should match your desktop pretty soon. Microsoft Viva Connections is available on iPad. Microsoft is debuting this Viva Connections to iPad with, I believe, the tag features 101167 the Microsoft 365 roadmap. Again, this will be rolling out the early part of March. It was been in preview for the past 3 months, with general availability towards the end of March. The last thing we have is Graph API for Teams meetings for transcripts. Microsoft has incorporated new org-wide application permissions and RSC application permissions with the aim of ensuring that apps can access meeting transcripts for a specific meeting. The resource-specific consent permissions specifically enables admins to authorize users to approve consent to apps so they get specific access to a team's meeting transcript to which is installed to, rather than providing them access to the entire tenant. This feature was tagged 95788 in Microsoft 365 roadmap, which I believe it was in beta last year. Last July was this entire time it's been there, but it's now expected to hit general availability in mid-June. So about a year later, everyone should be able to start playing around with this. And that is the scoop on Microsoft 365 and Teams and Viva stuff.
Microsoft, I'm not going to comment, on each and every one of those, or even necessarily comment on a group of them. When I look at that list, that just proves something to me that we continue to talk about. The cash cow for Microsoft is becoming more and more the business unit every day. The Teams, the Office, the Microsoft 365, the Azure, that they're pounding on it daily. And look at that list of features that you mentioned there that's coming or changing, and how quick they seem to be getting some of that done. I think they're continuing to nail down the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, the approach, and it's going to play into kind of the chat topic of this podcast. It's just a matter of when do we pick up those release notes here in the next few weeks, the next month, the next 6 months, and we've got all of these Chat GPTs, or whatever the name turns out to be, for various things, and we've got a page of release notes.
Yeah, I mean, as we noted during their quarterly earnings report, obviously enterprise is what maintained through turbulent pandemic. It's been continually going up before the pandemic. It skyrocketed during the pandemic, and coming out the other side, even though we're still in the pandemic, it is still going up. So that is the business they will, like you said, hammer. That is their Google search. That is the thing that they're going to need to protect in the coming future. So, what do you got next for us? That might be more fun than updates for
Well,
roadmaps.
a little business here to take care of. It is gaming business, and something we have had to talk about quite a bit already this year. The Activision Blizzard Microsoft merger is
Drama.
back in the news. More drama, and folks, it's going to be more hoops for Microsoft to jump through. The UK's CMA has said, nope, we don't think so. We don't like it. And they have let Microsoft know that, hey, in the current form, we're probably going to oppose this. And, there are people out there for both sides. Sony just jumped up and down, I'm sure. And then the folks at Microsoft kind of hang their head and say, well, what curve do we have to go around now? And basically, what the UK is saying here is, this is going to give Microsoft an unfair advantage, and they're and this is something new I have seen, they're actually concerned about the UK gamers who they say might not be able to afford Microsoft consoles and Microsoft services, that this merger could force them into a sole provider and force someone who can afford it to spend more money versus, having maybe a PS5 or a Nintendo Switch, whatever they choose to have. The other thing that has been brought up by the UK is they say, look, Call of Duty is a big deal. You give this cash cow to Microsoft the way Microsoft computes the value of a customer and what that customer means to them, then it only makes sense that at some point Microsoft may say, hey, Call of Duty is an exclusive, or put some sort of stranglehold on the titles where you have to do something with Microsoft to play Call of Duty. So the UK has basically said, "Hey, let's for now we're going to voice our oppositions. Let's back up and take a look at this." And I think this is what you're. I don't think the UK is necessarily going to be the only folks that take this approach, and I don't think Microsoft is going to say, "Hey, we're just not going to sell in the UK." They could do that, if I'm not mistaken. They could say, "Look, you don't agree? We don't have to sell our products there." But I don't foresee that happening. I see the lawyers sitting back down at the table and figuring out how to jump through this hoop. Phil Spencer has given several, nods to say, "Hey, we're not going to do anything funny with Call of Duty. We're going to make sure that gamers get an opportunity to play it on multiple platforms." But they just haven't made the UK CMA happy yet. And I think they are the first ones to step out and just say, "Nope, and this is why." So let's see what the lawyers can do.
Yeah, we've been reading about Microsoft deal, extended deal for Sony. I don't know if that was in the initial documents that they sent over. So this could be something that they're making the decision on based on the documents that they currently had, not the ones that have been added to it. So who knows if that provision uh, could appease them. We just want to make sure that we're being fair and clear that the CMA's provisional decision comes after they investigated. Site-wide visits. They've gone to Microsoft, they've gone to Activision, they've talked to everyone there. They've analyzed 3 million internal documents. That's a ton of documents. They've commissioned independent surveys of UK gamers. They've also had hearings. They've also listened to competitors and cloud service providers about the industry and the market. So, as much as we've written about, Sony being in their ear, they've done their due diligence. They do have a valid argument about people not being able to afford expensive consoles, both for Microsoft and Sony, and being forced to use cloud gaming. That market should still be open. Shouldn't just be dominated by Microsoft. That's their argument, essentially saying. Um, like you said, I think that they're going to sit down with the lawyers, hammer out some concessions, saying we won't, make these certain deals. We will keep these certain games that are, currently in development, that are future development, or the ones that we have licenses for past games. We're not going to start shutting those down. It's going to be a back and forth, but they are the first to come out and say no. There is the EU as well that they're finishing up their secondary portion of their investigation, and we already know the FTC is already saying no before they even have anything official to say. So Microsoft's got their work cut out for them. They have to respond with their concessions by March, essentially. So they have about 3 weeks to figure out what it is that the UK wants, what the CMA is looking for in order to say yes. And then they have to move on to the next one, which is the EU, and then the FTC. So their proposed internal date of closing this by like June of this year, maybe slipping further into the fall. What is our last headline?
We've got one more, folks, for you Ubisoft gamers out there. You might be a little disappointed. It looks like maybe Ubisoft may be trying to get some more money out of you. We had mentioned in the past that on Microsoft and in the last few weeks that the Ubisoft games were headed to Game Pass. Well, that doesn't appear to be where they're going, but they are coming. The Ubisoft games will be coming in the form of a Ubisoft Plus membership. Kind of like if you're familiar with EA Play and how EA Play fits in with the Xbox Live ecosystem, or Xbox Live, listen to me. The showing my age here, folks. The Xbox ecosystem, and if you've got the premium membership, you get some of the EA benefits. If you don't, you can buy those games separately through the EA app. And that's kind of what you're looking at here with Ubisoft. And for those that aren't familiar, I'll call out some of the bigger titles: the Rainbow Sixes of the world, the Assassin's Creed, the Far Cry series, all the way through Far Cry 6, I believe. And let's see, we have The Ghost Recon series for those that are fan of those. And we don't know any pricing yet, and we don't know exactly when it's going to be available when we put this on the website. But it's coming, so you can expect a Ubisoft Plus app or some way to tie your Xbox membership to Ubisoft to be able to take advantage of your Ubisoft games.
I'm looking forward to it. There are a ton of Assassin's Creed games that I have put off on playing. I have some free time, not a lot, but a little bit that I'm hoping to jump back into these games and play.
I want to jump back into some of the Tom Clancy, the Ghost
That
Recons,
is
and the
good stuff.
Rainbow Sixes. That's what I grew up on. I grew up, folks, on Rainbow Six Las Vegas. I know you guys remember that one.
Yep,
The breaking, it was a big thing to rappel down the rope and break through the windows and start
this is the
shooting.
best.
So,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting back into some of those older titles. The Division 2, I played both of those. I Watchdog Legions is a good one. And I'm a fan of the Far Cry series too, but not so much as the Tom Clancy series.
Yeah. With that being said, we hope you guys have had fun with us. We thank you for joining us for another week. We will be keeping an eye on the ChatGPT stuff, obviously, and all of the I guess Activision and Blizzard stuff. But if there's any other topics, we will be covering some Windows stuff as it comes in. But if there are any topics you guys want us to cover or would like us to give special notice to, please let us know in the comments or any of the comments on any of the articles we write, because we would love to hear from you. On Twitter, where can people comment or offer suggestions to you?
David PAJ1978 on Twitter, and as Kareem said, you guys can help us shape this podcast to some degree. If you have something you want us to talk about, something you want us to change, throw it out there. We'll see what we can do with it.
Yeah, you can find me at Mindhead1 on Twitter as well. With that being said, go enjoy your weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.